Coming to you live from the heart of Tyson's Corner, Virginia. It's Tuesday Morning Live with your hosts, Bryan and Bill Bolton.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to our debut. This is our inaugural episode. We've got an exciting topic, something very important to any business owner. We're going to discuss how to attract and keep top talent, especially in this really weird marketplace that we're in right now. I'm Bill Bolton. I've got Bryan McLemore with me, and we can't wait to introduce our guest here in just a moment.
That's right, Bill, and it's going to be a fantastic episode. We got a great guest. He's an expert in the human resources and recruiting field. But before we get started, let's go ahead and give a shout out to the people that pay the bills, our sponsors. Brand Ready Media, high quality video production and video marketing, and BB Insurance. If you don't have business insurance, then you are going to experience a huge liability. All right, well, let's go ahead and kick this conversation off. I want to introduce the one, the only, Danny Mckenzie. Danny, welcome to the show.
Hey guys, thanks for having me this morning.
You're very welcome, sir. So I'm going to go ahead and kick this conversation off. You know, we were just talking before the show, trying to get our notes together, and we were discussing all the problems that a business has today in trying to attract the right type of people and really high quality people. What are your thoughts on that, Danny?
So there's a couple different areas that I think about when I think of high quality people and top talent. First of all, I think the conversation around recruiting them and keeping them, the wrong topics of conversation are being discussed, meaning, you know, it's not about paid time off or whether or not they have benefits. I mean, those things are important to a degree, but more and more as we look at the incoming millennials and Gen Z into the workforce, in order to attract and retain that top talent, you really need to get to the core of who that person is. What wakes them up every day? What culture can you create in your organization that actually attracts them? Or are you stuck based on 1980s, 2000s, office environments where no wonder there's going to be a disconnect, right? Gone are the days where you can come in and you have a water cooler conversation. It's the same types of conversation, they're happening, but they look completely different. Couple things that come to mind. One, whether or not they can work remote. Two, what's the mission and vision of the organization? And do they feel like they're a valuable member of the team, or are they just another cog in the wheel that is this machine that they never have a direct input of? And do they really feel like they're having their needs met on the workplace? And, that to have that conversation 15 years ago would have been preposterous. But the organizations that are having all of the success recruiting and retaining top talent are the ones that have embraced this philosophy.
Danny, you brought up, one really good, point, the cooler talks. How in this day and age, especially with as many remote workers as we currently have, what's a good idea to recreate that sort of an environment where you get to go into the office and talk about last night's Seinfeld episode? The kind of banter that you would have when you put, 50, 100 people in one building and let them, run amok, basically. How do you recreate that kind of a culture with, on Zoom calls and things like this right now?
Yeah, so that's a great question. I think it takes a lot of detailed and a lot of specific planning. Those conversations still need to be had because the problem with everybody working remote is the potential for everybody to feel like they're on an island. When all you do is get up in the morning, go to your home office, and log in to a work call, do some work, log out, to your point, Bill, you don't really feel a part of the organization. And conversely, I also know people who have gone to work for an organization that had no remote work, and they required them to come into the office. So the basis of the conversation from a 30,000 foot view is you really have to identify what motivates that individual. If you have a remote opportunity, you have to make sure that the person that you're hired is not only willing to work remotely, but has the propensity and the ability to be productive and still feel engaged. There's no right or wrong answer in this thing. The basis of conversation is really getting to the core of who your employee is as an individual. There's a couple things to keep in mind. There's an article on Forbes that I recently read that talks about empathy being the #1 characteristic of a good leader. And as a leader, if you don't empathize with your employees, with all of the things that are going on today, including, Bill, engaging in their personal life when you're talking to them and not just making it about business, having conversations that are outside the realm of what it is you guys actually do. So being empathetic is very important. The #1, so go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I think another important thing that maybe we could talk about is teamwork. When somebody's on an island of their own, how do you make them feel like a part of the team? I know a lot of people, a lot of businesses, they have scrum masters, and the scrum master comes in and gets everybody going on board. And can you tell me a little bit about that, your experience with that?
Yeah, so it's interesting. When I think of teams and working well with others, I think back in high school, right? And whenever you had the projects in chemistry class or whatever class you were in, and you had a project, you always had 1 or 2 people that really took the ball and ran with it, right? And then you have kind of the mingling classmates that would just come along for the ride. And you really have to be careful to have a strong leader that can lead more of, be a facilitator instead of a manager, right? So what's the difference, right? So a manager is going to dictate what needs to get done and then tell people how to do it. A facilitator is going to ask really good questions to draw out the inner capability of the employee that they have innately. They might not even know that they have the ability to complete that task, but because of that leader's ability to facilitate and draw the team in, will create the culture that people want to be a part of. And instead of, dictating, okay, here's the project, here's what needs to get done, here's a timeline, everybody go work. And that's not how to get a project done. The #1 reason why people leave, they don't leave companies. People leave leaders, and they leave people. And if you've ever read Extreme Ownership or Extreme Leadership, they talk a lot about there are no bad teams. There's only bad leaders and bad managers. And when you really think about that, it's a hard pill to swallow. But if you're a leader or a manager or a coach who is always looking to get better, then you have to take that critical feedback and apply it to how you react and how you engage with your employees.
I'm still very confused about how to create this culture. As a small business owner myself, and I don't have brick and mortar. Everything is going to be remote. So as we do enter into, the next, 10, 20 years of our business life cycles, specific to, millennials and the Gen Zers, the new generation of kids that are coming out of college, is it appropriate to try to, I guess, embrace the online culture? Or is it more important to try to get them together, like at a more public forum where they're actually meeting each other face to face?
Right. So that's a great question, Bill. So couple things that I am curious about when it comes to culture in organizations, because, when it comes down to it, no matter what you're selling, what you're doing, managing people is managing people, right? And so the question I would ask is, what motivates your employees? Do they want to be left on an island, right? And here's how I tell. There's some telltale signs. When I led a team of salespeople, I always looked for the things they weren't telling me, right? And I think that EQ is as much as your IQ in being able to get the job done. For instance, when I led a sales team and I had a cookout, let's say at a park, the first person that showed up and the last one to leave are your most committed employees, right? The last one to show up and the first one to leave, what does that tell you, right? Do you find yourself always having to engage the conversation with your employee, or are they always excited to come back to you with what they've accomplished and what they've done? Those little subtleties matter when dealing with employees. If you're always having to ask the question, hey, did you get this done? Did you get that done? Did you get this done? You feel productive as a manager, but is your employee really engaged, right? So finding an employee who's able to work in that environment is equally important as creating the environment. So does the employee have the ability to communicate actively? Because that's what it takes in order to have a remote worker. You can't have somebody that, doesn't come to you unless it's in a meeting. I want
somebody that will actually ask for help. I mean, that's a huge, difficult thing to find.
Well, I think that's part of like instilling your company culture. When you talk about culture, you got to have a culture of, hey, if there's a problem, we're all on a big team. You have a lot of resources here. Come ask us a question. It's about hiring the right people to begin with. When you hire somebody, you got to ask them questions, not just where do you live, how much do you want to make, but like, what are you looking to get out of this job? What do you want to do personally? What's your goals over the next 3 years? Like your personal goals. How can we help you achieve those goals? Getting to know that employee, like you said, Danny. Managing people is not being a boss. It's like managing their expectations, their hopes, their dreams, depositing into their being a partner with them. I always looked at it as in when I was working with people, it's my responsibility to develop them and to help them get where they need to get on the next level up the rung. And if you can find the right people that have a commonality that fits in well with your company's goals, then that's part of the culture. And you want to make sure that you talk about that to everybody in the company so that they all know it. How often have we gone into a company or a business and asked the CEO and the president, what are your values? And they'll go A, B, C, and D. And then we'll ask all the employees, interview the employees, and they're like B or A or
F.
Or I get free tickets to the movie theaters. That's why I work here. You know what I mean?
I get to eat all the popcorn I want.
Yeah. So you said something, depositing into somebody's, there's a relationship bank. We all have one personally with our spouses. You talk about brownie points, people make fun of brownie points. Well, that stuff happens in every relationship, whether it's your friend. Are you the guy that always shows up when he needs you? Or are you the guy that backs out on the day he has to move, right? Because your back hurts or you had something happen and you had something come up, right? So the reason I bring that up is it summed up nicely. I wish I would have came up with it. People don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. Once they realize that, this person really is a person because of X, Y, and Z, with what I do, making sure employees get paid on time is the number one priority. With that being said, I've had to hand deliver paychecks on a Friday morning to one of my business owner clients because they forgot to do payroll that week. And I had 3 employees that were under my leadership that were not going to get paid. So I had to hand deliver paychecks on a Friday morning in Richmond. That's the kind of stuff where, okay, this guy really cares, right? Taking a conversation late at night about something that has nothing to do with work, and helping an employee or a client through those troubling times. If you can get on the short list of people that they call when shit hits the fan, you've really done something.
Yeah, I agree. What, so let's talk about, some of the challenges. So I think that we identify that you got to pick the right people. And if you don't pick the right people to work in your organization, then, really that's on you. When I say the right people, I mean, we don't want warm bodies in our business. We want people that are gonna, what's the word I'm looking for? They're gonna jive. They're gonna click. They're gonna be, the best fit. That's the first step, I think. And then, beyond that, keeping people. What are some other things you can do to attract the right employees? It's a competitive market. Your business may be the same as other businesses. You're all vying from the same small pool of people. What are some tools that people can use to get the best people?
Well, I think, the first thing to consider is what kind of job are you hiring for, right? Are you hiring for the frontline worker? It's a completely different job ad, completely different process. But if you're looking for that mid to senior level manager, it's really important to have that strategic person online, because that's the person who is going to carry the torch of your culture. Because as a business owner, the hardest part is going from being in charge of the whole process to now being in charge of only the people who actually have the whole process that are working the system. So, Steve Jobs said it best, and forgive me, I'm going to butcher the quote, but it had something to do with, why hire the brightest and smartest person in the world only to bring them in and tell them what to do? Why not give them the opportunity to actually work in their talent, come up with ideas and strategies that are going to help the organization? With the clear expectation, as we said about earlier, about managing expectations, that just because you come up with the idea doesn't mean we're going to run with it. But I want constructive feedback. I want everybody in the organization to contribute towards the end goal, right? And so the worst thing you can do is, as I said, hire somebody super bright, tons of experience, and come in and say, okay, here's your job description. Here's what you're going to do, right?
I love it.
But to your point, what's that?
Go ahead.
To your point.
Go ahead, Danny. My bad.
One of the things that it starts with is the recruiting process. What does your job post look like? I heard somebody recently compare it to buying a car. So follow me here. You're going to buy a Corvette, a new 2022 Corvette off the lot. What does the marketing piece say? It's all about how it's going to make you feel, how it's going to make you experience driving in a new way. It's not the maintenance calendar of what you need to accomplish every 30,000 miles, every 5,000 miles. It doesn't have that anywhere in the piece. So the biggest problem, I think, with a lot of organizations is they think recruiting is an HR function. Recruiting is a marketing function.
Oh, that's an interesting take. I did not think about that. It's funny, when you were talking about the Corvette, I thought the Corvette was representative of the employee. Like when you look to get a Corvette, you're like, oh, it's had 10 owners over the past 3 years. I'm like, I don't know. Sounds like it could have a lot of miles on it. Something could be going on.
Yep.
I love
no,
it.
Your
Steve Jobs quote was...
job posts and sorry, Bill, go ahead. I couldn't hear you. Sorry.
No, I just wanted to, tag on to one of the things you were talking about. Your Steve Jobs, quote that you said you were going to butcher, and I'm going to tell you one right now that I'm probably going to butcher too. But a friend of mine used to hang out with Ted Leonsis, and Ted owns all kinds of fun sports teams. They were watching a Caps game, sitting in Ted Leonsis seats, and he said, "Yeah, surround yourself with very good people, people smarter than you, empower them, and then get the fuck out of the way. It's probably the best advice I could ever, think of ever. And to, equate that, not even top level management, but just to anybody that you put into a company, make sure that they feel empowered, make sure that they know that there is upward movement if they continue to, be happy and produce something for the company itself. It's just I guess, back to the original question, like, how do you make sure that they are happy?
Yep. And to Brian's point, it starts with recruiting. It starts with identifying the proper talent. The quickest way you can get rid of top talent is to keep around people who don't fit your culture. They're going to leave.
That's right.
It's a toxic environment. I know somebody who left a $400,000 a year job because of culture.
Yep.
Those things matter. The higher wage earner, or the higher the responsibility is of the person you're hiring.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I mean, I think something we were talking about before we got on the show is that it's not guaranteed. You get back in the day, 40, 50 years ago, whatever, you had a job someplace, you worked there. You're like, I'm going to be a company man and they're going to take care of me. That's not guaranteed anymore. So employees are looking for all the upside. How do I feel? How do you treat me? If I'm not going to have a guaranteed paycheck, then am I having fun? Am I learning anything? Am I progressing in my career? And if you can keep people progressing in their career and keep them around because they're learning something, you're giving something back to them, then hopefully they'll stay and they'll be loyal to you.
That's a really valid point, actually, Brian. So, speaking of education, specifically, just that topic, I love to learn things myself. And if I don't, I get bored and I move on to something else. With the new type of employees that we're going to have here, again, the millennials, Gen Zers, they learn differently. Is that something that you take into account as well? Because education is going to be a huge part of any job. So do you have any advice on how to educate people as you bring them on board?
Yes, very much so. So there are a lot of different ways to educate and train employees. The worst thing you can do is train them like we did 20 years ago, which is sit them in a room in front of, I actually read a book, now it's on a computer, and just go through all the modules that you have to go through in order to be trained, right? That's probably the most, it's efficient for some things, but you can't do that for everything, right? So a lot of on-the-job training, setting the proper expectation. Again, like Brian said, it's all about expectations. How long does it take for somebody to actually grasp the concept of what we're doing? In one of my roles recently, there was a saying that it took 18 months to really land before you actually knew what you were doing. Is that a reasonable time frame for the level of experience and expertise you're looking to establish? Probably not for all industries, but for some, right? I mean, Bill, how long does it take to become a successful insurance agent? You're not going to be out selling policies in a month.
3 months. I mean, no, I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
Well, I mean,
that's
that's
3 months, right? But even then, you still don't know how to spell insurance.
Yeah, it's true.
So
but that's part of that
realistic expectation. Kind of like, I've heard people in the real estate business talk about, if you can sell $1 million worth of homes in your first year, you're doing okay. Well, over here, that's not hard, but in some areas where housing prices are much lower, so it's all about setting the proper expectation, allowing the employee to have enough runway to mess up. I think the biggest problem, back to a conversation we were having earlier, why people don't ask for help is they feel like it's a sign of weakness, or they feel like it's oh, you hired me to figure all this out, so I can't come to you for help. No, that's actually exactly what I don't want you to have happen, because then you're probably going to come up with a way that is against what how we want to present ourselves to the client, right? So, you know, there's all different kinds of way. One other thing I want to say about millennials and Gen Zers as they're getting older, you know, there's a misconception that they are, when it comes to tech, there's one slight word that I want people to think about the change of. And when I say that a Gen Zer or a millennial is tech blank, what's the first word that comes to mind?
Savvy.
Incorrect. They are tech dependent.
All right, fair enough.
They don't know how any of this shit works, but they don't work without it. So think about that for a second. They don't know how any of this stuff works, but they can tell you that you need it in order to progress. Our generation knows how it works. And there are some who are going to school now to learn how it works. But as a majority of the population, they don't know how this stuff works. And so you really have to be patient with them. And you really have to be cognizant of, okay, yeah, you know what? They're so dependent on it. But unless it's within Facebook or I guess that's even old these days, right? If it's in Instagram or TikTok, they know how to use it. But other than that, they don't know how to use this stuff. So just a little mindset.
Yeah. I literally had this conversation with a friend of mine, you know, last night, just about what a whore for my phone I am. I can't do anything in life without my phone on me at all.
Yeah, it's like
it's even worse. You know, my son, he can't walk away from his phone. He's more addicted to his than I am to mine. It's part of life now.
You know,
Danny, thank you, man. Go ahead, Brian.
Yeah. Well, I just want to, one last thing I want to touch on before we go ahead and wrap the show up. I want to ask you, Danny, what do you think about when you say to people that have a business and they hire people and they're like, and their employees are not performing because, you know, they're not concerned. Their number one priority is not doing a great job. Their priority is that you should pay me and I should show up and I log on and I get paid and I need all these perks, but I'm not getting the job done because, you know, there's some employers that are like, I pay you money and you do what we want. And that's like the baseline contract. Like, what do you do about that?
So it really comes down to motivation, right? What's their motivation? What makes them come and go to work? There's seasons in people's lives, right? Which is back to empathy. What if their spouse is sick? Or their kid is sick? Or there's something going on personally in their life that's not allowing them to show up as the best version of themselves. Do you have the empathy as a leader to help them understand that, okay, this is where they are right now? And either based on history or based on what I've seen this person's character to be, I know that after some time I can get them productive, right? And so, you know, really it's because I face this all the time too as I've led people. When you get down to the core of who that person is, and listen, at the end of the day, if they're a 22-year-old and all they do is live in their parents' basement and they just want to show up and get paid, then there's probably a job for them somewhere. But it might not be with your organization.
But it won't be here.
Right. I mean, that's just reality, right? And so if they're not motivated to be the best version of themselves every day, then do they have the propensity to be motivated, or are they just lacking inspiration?
And that is a great last thought to think about. Danny, I want to thank you for coming on the show. And it's been fantastic. And for all of you people listening out there, you can see more. Just follow us on Facebook and LinkedIn, and leave comments. And we'd love to have you as a guest on our show. Reach out. Till next time. Bill, where are we going this time for lunch?
Same place, baby. Let's hop in the limo and get our butts over to the Olive Garden.
Going to the Olive Garden. We'll see you there.
Unlimited breadsticks. Delicious.